Yo, I'm Yovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. I just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers lost 127 to 117 to the Minnesota Timberwolves. This was a tough one for LA on a couple of fronts. So a few hours before the game, we get an update from the Lakers that LeBron James is dealing with flu-like symptoms, and he is a late scratch for the game. And I can confirm that LeBron was playing through sickness during the Cleveland game on Saturday. The Lakers told us after that game that he was not going to speak to the media. And he's been dealing with, he's been coughing and kind of under the weather for several days now. But he was asking for Dayquil after the game. It was clearly not himself from an energy perspective. So the fact that he had to miss a game, especially on a back-to-back, was not that surprising. But it was definitely a blow for the Lakers entering this game. And then at the 26-second mark of the first quarter, Anthony Davis has this incredible putback dunk where he gets hit in the face by Kyle Anderson, who's going to contest him, and he falls down, is holding his eye, the same eye that he injured against Golden State 3 weeks ago when he suffered that left corneal abrasion, basically a scratch on the cornea. And he played through the final 26 seconds of the quarter. He also played through a groin injury that he suffered earlier in the quarter. There was a possession where he basically did the splits and started holding his groin and kind of favoring the other side a bit the rest of the quarters. So in between the first and second quarters, AD went back to the locker room, similar to the Golden State game. He went back to the locker room after the first quarter in that one. And he typically sits out the first 3 to 5 minutes of the second quarter. That's the Jaxson Hayes, LeBron James led bench shift. So didn't really think much of it, other than obviously it was a bit concerning that he went back to the locker room. But then the 7-minute mark passed, the 6-minute mark passed, the 4-minute mark passed. AD did not come back. No update from the team, which was a little frustrating during the whole process of we didn't even know what he was being evaluated for. Like, was it him being hit in the face again, him being hit in the eye? Was it the groin injury? Was it both? We weren't quite sure. We assumed it was the eye, but we weren't exactly sure what he was dealing with. And then seconds before halftime ends and the third quarter starts, we get a text update that AD is out for the rest of the game after being hit in the eyes. So this is the second game in 3 weeks that AD has exited early due to an eye injury. And he's been poked in the eye a couple times in between then. Ultimately was fine in those instances. But this is something that is now a bit of a concern for LA down the stretch of with AD playing as physically and as dominant as he is, there's going to be a lot of contact and teams sending multiple guys in the paint and just arms and fingers and like all that stuff can lead to this getting re-aggravated again. So I do wonder if this leads to him potentially wearing goggles or some type of mechanism, I don't know, mask, goggles, whatever, to try to prevent this. But this is now something that has happened a couple times in about 3 weeks. And it's certainly something the Lakers are going to have to try to prevent moving forward, because if you're in the play-in and AD gets poked in the eye again and has to miss the rest of that game or even has to miss a quarter. This game really flipped in the second quarter. LA was outscored 46-27. I think part of it was the shock of losing AD. Part of it was just a bad quarter. Minnesota shot the ball really well. Naz Reid had 18 points in that second quarter. Minnesota shot 62% overall, made 8 threes. And that was the game, because the rest of the way, LA actually outscored Minnesota 53-48 in the second half. And part of that was garbage time. But even so, like, LA outscored them 28-23 in the third quarter. They had a 26-6 run over a 9-minute span to cut the deficit to as few as 4 points. LA was within 4 with less than 2 minutes left in the third. So they had their opportunities to make this a bit of a game. But to me, this just came down to, you don't have your 2 best players against a really good Wolves team, a team that's still good without Karl Anthony Towns. They've been winning games. They had motivation as they're jockeying with the Nuggets and the Thunder for seeding in the West. So they were playing for something that mattered as well. It wasn't like the Lakers were the only team with stakes here. And just being down your 2 best players, 2 players that give the Lakers a baseline level of size and physicality and rim pressure that they just didn't have consistently with those two guys out of the lineups. Let's quickly touch on some of the box score numbers from this game and then get into our 3 takeaways. AD played all 12 minutes in the first quarter, as he typically does. He had 4 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. Was just 2 for 6. Rudy Gobert bothered him a little bit, I thought. But LA was +4 in his 12 minutes. They had a 4-point lead entering the second quarter. And I think had AD stayed healthy, they probably win this game, or it's at least a close game and it goes into crunch time. It's just a matter of execution and shots falling and whatnot. But I think the Lakers showed that they can play with Minnesota even without LeBron. And they did that earlier in the year in Minnesota. They had a tough, close loss there. Without LeBron, they had another close loss with LeBron. Remember, that was the game where he hit the 3, but then they overturned it and ruled it a 2, said his foot was on the line. It was a matter of a centimeter at most. And, still to this day, the Lakers are bothered by that loss. They believe it should have been a 3-pointer. And it's something that LeBron has referenced a couple times since then. So a tough blow, obviously, losing AD. But Rui Hachimura really stepped up in his absence, 30 points on 11 of 17 shooting. I thought he exploited the Wolves defense with pick and pops and catch and shoots and drawing. I mean, the Lakers went small just because Jaxson Hayes was the only other available center that they were realistically going to rely on. And Rui made the Wolves pay for helping off of him during stretches, ended up making 4 threes. Just continued high-level play from Rui, and he led the team in scoring. Jaxson Hayes, though. Jaxson Hayes had one of his best performances of the season, if not his best. I think that Boston game probably overall what was his best. LA got the win without LeBron and AD. So I think you lean that way. But this was right there. 19 points, 10 rebounds, 5 steals, and a block. He had a stretch in the third quarter where he had 4 dunks in about 4 minutes. A couple plays were back-to-back dunks, but him getting out in transition, him as the roll man with D'Lo, he was just exposing the Wolves' pick and roll coverages and slipping and rolling at the opportune times, and then dunking on any and everybody. A really impressive game from Jaxson. And it wasn't just the dunks. Like, the dunks are what get the attention, but it was the rebounding, the not fouling, having 6 stocks in comparison with just 3 fouls. He did a really solid job stepping up and filling in for AD. D'Lo nearly had a triple-double. He had an off shooting night, just 5 for 19 shooting. Minnesota's length and quality perimeter defense can really bother him, just with having multiple guys that can get into the ball, pressure it 94 feet, pressure it within the half court. Just a lot of size and length on this team. But 15 points, 7 rebounds, 11 assists for D'Lo, just 1 for 7 on threes. But I thought despite a poor shooting night from him, he still found ways to be effective with his rebounding and his playmaking, finding Jaxson Hayes, getting him open, and really just being the conductor offensively. Spencer Dinwiddie started in LeBron's place and had 18 points and 7 assists. Got to the free throw line a bunch, was 7 of 7 from the free throw line. So this was his second highest scoring performance as a Laker and his highest scoring performance with D'Angelo Russell on the floor, just because that previously he had stepped in for D'Lo, had the 26-point game against the Pacers, but he had not been as aggressive with D'Lo on the floor during his Lakers tenure, and I thought this was a step in the right direction. One major positive for LA in this game was they still got to the free throw line 32 times, despite not having LeBron and AD. AD did not attempt a free throw, so LA was 28 of 32, 87.5%. So that was a positive takeaway of still being able to get downhill, draw fouls. But enough about the game. I don't want to take away too much from this, just because I think it's as simple as if the Lakers don't have LeBron or AD, they are going to lose. I think they could beat Memphis without them, but looking at Golden State and New Orleans, 2 of their final 3 games, they're going to lose those games if they don't have LeBron and AD. It's really that simple. So let's get into our 3 takeaways. Takeaway number 1 is tonight was just a series of bad breaks for the Lakers, from LeBron dealing with his flu-like symptoms and not playing. They were also without Gabe Vincent, who the team is still managing and easing in on back-to-backs. It's worth noting that this was the Lakers' final back-to-back of the season, so that won't be a concern anymore with Gabe. With LeBron, who's still been dealing with his left ankle injury, though Darvin Ham did note that he was not held out tonight because of the left ankle. And then AD getting hit in the exact same eye in a similar way and leaving in a similar manner again. End of the first quarter, It goes to the locker room in between quarters, doesn't return to the bench, and we don't hear an update. In the Golden State game, we didn't get an update until the third quarter. And this one, at least it was right before the third quarter. But this was a really important game. This was a critical game for LA, with New Orleans beating Phoenix and Sacramento beating Brooklyn. Those teams that the Lakers were jockeying with and right on the heels of now got some breathing room. Sacramento is now a game ahead of the Lakers in the loss column, which, given they also have the tiebreaker on the Lakers, that's essentially 2 losses ahead of LA. LA dropped back to 9th after this loss. And it's a temporary thing just because it's going to depend on what happens in their game against Golden State on Tuesday. And I'm going to touch on that in one of my other takeaways. But this was a big loss. And it's just unfortunate for LA that they didn't lose fair and square, right? Like, it had LeBron played, had AD played, and they still lost to Minnesota. And it was just a matter of Minnesota's the better team, or they had the better night. Then that's one thing. But to not have your best or second best player, and then your other remaining best or second best player is playing fairly well. Like, again, he wasn't shooting the ball well, and I think could have been more aggressive offensively, but he was impacting the game. He had a few assists. He already had a few rebounds. And the Lakers were +4 with him on the floor. And then he goes out and you just get ran off the floor. So for the Lakers, this is just a really crappy situation that they had to lose in this manner. Again, it wasn't a matter of like the most recent Sacramento game where LeBron, AD, and D'Lo combined to shoot 5 of 22, or the most recent Indiana game where as a team, it was one of their worst shooting performances of the season. Once AD was out, the Lakers just didn't have a chance. And he's been their most important player this season. I think he's been their best player this season. And not having him, in addition to already not having Vando and Christian Wood and LeBron James, like, the Lakers were just too small in this game against one of the biggest teams in the league in Minnesota, a team that thrives in the paint with rebounding and just with leveraging their size. So in many instances, the Lakers were just too small. This was just a difficult break for LA, and one that ultimately could prevent them from getting up into the 7-8 game, which has significant ramifications. Now, takeaway number 2 is going to go in a more positive direction, because after watching this game, I believe the Lakers would beat the Timberwolves in a 7-game series. And that is going off of all 4 regular season matchups. And regular season results can be a bit wonky. They're not always reflective of what's going to happen in a potential playoff series. But I think this is a good matchup for the Lakers, and especially if Karl-Anthony Towns isn't back, and it's unclear what's going to happen with him. He's reportedly going to return before the end of the regular season, so that is an X factor in terms of just his availability as a secondary scorer, as a shooter, as another elite offensive player for the Timberwolves. But I just like how the Lakers match up. AD and LeBron have historically done well against Rudy Gobert in both Utah and Minnesota. The Lakers have defended Anthony Edwards fairly well this season, and I just don't think their offense is good enough. I think the primary way to beat the Lakers is exposing some of their defensive limitations, especially with Vando out of the lineup. And I just don't think Minnesota could do it. Like, Anthony Edwards is one of the most exciting players in the NBA. And when he's on, he's on. But I think his shot selection and just some of the tough shots he makes and some of the tough shots that the Lakers can force him into, and with Spencer Dinwiddie stepping up as one of the team's best perimeter defenders, with Gabe Vincent coming back, with Cam Reddish finally being healthy, like, the Lakers just have so many guys to throw at Anthony Edwards in a hypothetical matchup. Spencer, Gabe, Cam, Max, Austin. I thought Austin had some good possessions against Anthony Edwards in rewatching some of the film from this game and seeing Anthony Edwards' shots and offensive possessions. Like, and then you add in an engaged LeBron as the low man, and then Anthony Davis, who I think takes these matchups personally, with Rudy Gobert winning multiple Defensive Player of the Years. Like, it's no secret AD has been upset about Rudy winning some of those, about AD being overlooked as a defender. He believes he should be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation this year. Like, on several levels, I just think this is a good matchup for LA. I don't think Minnesota is good enough offensively. I think there's only 2 players the Lakers fear offensively in this matchup, and it's Anthony Edwards and Naz Reid. Now, Naz Reid is a Laker killer. He had a game-high 31 points tonight, including 18 in that 46-point second quarter for the Timberwolves. But the Lakers were still in this game without their 2 best players. And again, they nearly won in Minnesota without LeBron. They pulverized the Wolves in LA, though there was no Rudy Gobert, no Cat, no Kyle Anderson, no Monte Morris. So Minnesota was down 2 starters and 2 key bench guys. So like that's one where, okay, like you have to factor that in when looking at the Lakers winning. But then the Lakers had the other game in Minnesota that they nearly won, had LeBron's foot been a centimeter behind the 3-point line. So though the Wolves won the season series 3-1, look at LeBron not playing in 2 of the losses, AD going down in one of those losses, and then the other loss being LeBron and a controversial call at the end of the game costing the Lakers. So like Lakers could easily be 2-2 or 3-1 against the Wolves this season. And yes, that's revisionist history, but I just think when extrapolating how these matchups have played out in a regular season context into a 7-game series with the Lakers track record, with Minnesota's unprovenness, and as I said on episode 10 of Buha's Block, their unseriousness with Ant and Rudy and Cat, if he does end up coming back, like I think the Lakers take this series in 6 or 7 games. I think there was a lot to be encouraged by, like the inability to defend LA's pick and roll in that third quarter. Jaxson Hayes and Rui going off the way that they did. And look, I think there are some advantages for Minnesota. Both teams have good size and know how to leverage their size. So I think some of the Lakers' strengths against a smaller team like, say, Oklahoma City or the Clippers or the Suns, where they can just impose their will, they can do some of that against the Timberwolves, and they did some of that tonight. They don't do it as much in that matchup. So that's like, it's almost like a strength versus strength thing of both teams are typically the biggest team on the floor. I mean, honestly, Minnesota at times is bigger than the Lakers. Like if you look at their starting lineup, they started 3 guys 6'9" or above, and Ant is big for a shooting guard, big, strong, and athletic. So like Minnesota has, if anything, Minnesota has a slight size advantage over the Lakers. But I think with the way that the Lakers play, I just think they're a smarter basketball team than the Wolves. And the Wolves are tough. They're nasty. They're going to play really good defense. And another advantage I see is I think they can bother Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell defensively using Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Jordan McLaughlin, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like they have several guys who are plus defenders, if not elite perimeter defenders, to throw at LA's perimeter guys. And I think they can slow them down a bit, but I think it's a good matchup for LeBron. It's a good matchup for AD. I think Minnesota will struggle defending LA's revamped half-court offense and just this starting lineup that they have. And I would pick the Lakers, I think, in 6 games if they were matching up in a 1-8 or 2-7 matchup. And finally, takeaway number 3 is Tuesday's game against the Golden State Warriors is now a must win. And that was always kind of the case, but even more so now that the Lakers lost, just because if Golden State wins, the teams will be tied in the loss column at 35 losses, and Golden State will now have the tiebreaker, winning the season series 3-1. If LA wins the game, though, they will win the tiebreaker. It'll be 2-2, but then they have the better division record. And then on top of that, they will have 2 fewer losses than the Warriors, which at this point of the season, with only a couple games left, LA having the tiebreaker and 2 fewer losses, would essentially lock them in to being ahead of the Warriors. So this game has the power to potentially push the Lakers into the 9-10 game and even potentially make them more likely to be the 10 seed if Golden State can win out. Or it has the potential to lock them into at least number 9, putting Golden State below them at number 10, and still giving them a shot to jump into the 7-8 game if they can win out, and especially beat the Pelicans in the regular season finale. So this is the most important game of the season for the Lakers. It might end up being the Pelicans game just because that's the final game of the season. It's Lakers' final chance to jockey, and if the Pelicans are within striking distance and they can beat them and lock in them winning the season series and surpass them, like, of course that's more important. But the Golden State result is going to matter. If the Lakers lose the Golden State game, even if they win out, there's still a shot that they stay in number 9 or drop to number 10. I mean, the Golden State game is basically a play-in game, and the stakes are high. Again, either the Lakers separate themselves or the teams are neck and neck, with Golden State now having the tiebreaker. Assuming LeBron James and Steph Curry both play, they will both be rested, coming off missing. Steph rested against the Jazz. LeBron missed tonight's game with his flu-like symptoms. So like that kind of adds another element to it, where both guys could potentially be refreshed and rejuvenated and playing at the highest possible level at this point in the season. So that's a crucial game, an exciting game, but a game that could determine really the rest of the Lakers season. Because if they lose and somehow drop to 10, now you have to go to Golden State or Sacramento. Like, you have to win twice on the road. And that, for a group that, while they are coming off an impressive 5-1 road trip, has still been below 500 on the season on the road. The only team in the top 10 in the West that's under 500 on the road. That's a tall task, right? Like that is going to be tough for them to win the 9-10 on the road and then go to the 7-8 loser on the road and win that. So it's certainly possible. I'm not writing the Lakers off. I'm not saying if they drop to 10, the season's over by any means. But this Golden State matchup is crucial on several fronts, keeping the Lakers in the mix with New Orleans and Sacramento, distancing themselves from the Warriors, and giving them a shot to at least move up to number 8, if not number 7, if they can win out. So there's a lot of different ways that this can all play out. It's a bit confusing, and it's almost pointless to sort of try and theorize and go through the different scenarios, just because we're going to know by the weekend. We're going to see like how the Golden State game goes, how the Memphis game goes, and then how the New Orleans game goes. But the Lakers lost their margin for error by losing to the Timberwolves. They need to win out to optimize their playoff path and give themselves at least 2 chances to advance and make the playoffs. So Golden State is a must win. And regardless of how LeBron's feeling or if AD can see or not, like, they need to figure out a way to win that game. But that'll do it for tonight's show. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. For those on YouTube, please consider subscribing, hitting that notification button, dropping a comment, and hitting that like button. For those listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast platforms, please consider following, downloading, and leaving a 5-star review. I'll be back on Monday afternoon with episode 11 of Buha's Block. I will be previewing the final 3 games, going into each matchup, strengths, weaknesses, how LA matches up, how LA has fared recently against these teams. These are all teams the Lakers have played within the last couple months. So we'll be diving into that, previewing it, and breaking it all down. So I hope you tune in, and I will talk to you then.